WHGE 95.3 FM coming up. Open Eye. Roads was blocked off. It was crazy getting in here today. All right, now I'm here.
Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of masturbation or ego dignity. We do so because the chains of oppression in our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove.
Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm your host, Third Eye Optometrist, Patrice Gibbs. And as I always start, every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. We do that right here. All right? I didn't drop something. I dropped. All right. Okay, anyway. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Open Eye, where we don't just see the world, we analyze it. We challenge it, and if necessary, we expose it. Because something is happening right now, whether folks want to admit it or not, the illusion is cracking. For decades, many of us were taught to believe in a version of America that never fully existed. A version where justice was inedible, where truth would always rise, where allies stood on principle, and where power answered to the people. But today, that mask is slipping. We're watching the government that bullies its allies and then begs for loyalty. We're watching institutions that claim justice yet delay it for decades if they deliver it at all. We're watching for narratives, but so aggressively that people began to question their own reality. And let's be clear, this didn't just start yesterday. This didn't just start with one administration. This is the continuation of a system that has always depended on control. Control of resources, control of perception, and most importantly, control of people. See, the real battlefield has never been land or oil or power. It's been the human mind. If you can shape how people think, you can shape what they accept. If you can shape what they accept, you can shape what they tolerate. And if you can shape what they tolerate, you can rule without resistance. That's why history gets rewritten. That's why truth gets buried. That's why those who speak too clearly are labeled dangerous. Because an informed population is a hard population to control. So today we're pulling back the layers, we're connecting the dots, we're asking the questions that don't get asked in polite conversation. Not to divide, but to understand, not to inflame, but to awaken. Because once you see clearly, you can't unsee. This is the Open Eye.
We do so because the chains of oppression in our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove. The views and opinions expressed on the Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM, nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eyes hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual.
Hey, Rhonda, I see you, sister. WHGE 95.3 FM. First, let me take care of some business here. PSA, public service announcement. LIHEAP, crisis services have resumed. Newcastle County Crisis Services location are as follows. Energy Coordinating Agency, their phone number 302-504-6111. They are at 258 Chapman Road. Monday and Wednesday walk-ins, 9 a.m. to noon. Tuesday and Thursdays appointments. All right. Rose Hill Community Center, 19 Lamson Lane, Newcastle. Monday through Friday walk-ins, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Hey, Sister Sherry, I see you. Catholic Charities. That's 2601 West 4th Street. That's 4th and Green Hill Avenue. Monday and Wednesday appointments are available, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. All right. Let's keep it moving. I know by now, okay, y'all heard about Afro Man, and if you saw any of the trial, I'm sure you were quite amused. Afro Man, pretty funny dude, but he's straight up smart dude. He wasn't gonna let these people railroad him or get his money. The jury rejects police defamation lawsuit over rape parody videos. Rapper Afro Man has secured a significant legal victory after 7 Ohio police officers unsuccessfully sued him for defamation. The lawsuit stemmed from several musical videos in which Afro Man used security footage to mock a botched raid on his home. However, the jury sided with the artist, clearing him of all charges and upholding his right to creative expression. This right here is one of them rare moments where truth actually slipped past power and won. Let's talk about it. Afro Man didn't just make a song. He turned surveillance into testimony. He took footage that was meant to control him and flipped it into a public record of what was done to him. And that's what really scared those officers. Because this lawsuit, it was never really about defamation. It was about control of the narrative. See, when police raid your home, especially a botch raid, they rely on silence, confusion, and paperwork to clean it up afterwards. Reports get written, language gets softened, accountability disappears. But Afro Man did something different. He showed the footage. He let people see the chaos, the aggression, the absurdity. And then he did something even more dangerous. He laughed at it. He mocked it. He turned it into art that millions could consume, replay, and question. And that's what made them mad. Not lies, exposure. Because if it were truly defamation, they would have had evidence of falsehood. But instead, they tried to criminalize embarrassment. They try to argue that showing what they actually did harmed their reputation. Let that sink in. If the truth damages your reputation, the problem isn't the truth. It's your goddamn behavior. And let's be real about the broader pattern here. This isn't just about one rapper in Ohio. This is about a long-standing culture of policing in America where accountability is optional. Where misconduct is often shielded and where citizens, especially black citizens, are expected to endure violations quietly. Homes raided without proper cause, property damage, lives disrupted, and then what? Internal investigations, paid leave, silence. Yeah, Afro Man broke that cycle. He didn't just defend himself in court. He put the police on trial in the court of public opinion. And when those officers tried to use the legal system to intimidate him in the silence, the jury said, nah, not this time. That verdict matters because it reinforces something fundamental. Art is not crime. Truth is not defamation. And badges do not grant immunity from criticism. But don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean the system is suddenly fixed, not by a long shot. It just means in this moment, the system couldn't completely ignore what was right in front of it. And maybe that's the real takeaway. When people can see it clearly, when the footage is undeniable, when the narrative can't be rewritten, that's when accountability has a fighting chance. So big shout outs to Afro Man for doing what too many people are afraid or unable to do. Document, expose, and speak back. Because sometimes justice doesn't start in the courtroom. Sometimes it starts with a camera and the courage to press play. This is the open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Yeah. All men are created equal. Yeah, that's what they wanted, Sister Sherry. They wanted to be a victim in the mess that they created. Yeah. Get you some of that lemon pound cake now. Anyway, all men are created equal. So why are my people enslaved? Let's be clear about what happened in 1791. A free black man, Benjamin Banneker, sat down and wrote to one of the most powerful architects of this country, Thomas Jefferson. And he didn't beg, he didn't plead, he confronted the audacity of truth in the nation built on contradiction. Banneker pointed directly at the sentence that helped define America: all men are created equal, and asked the question this nation has been dodging ever since. If that's true, why are my people enslaved? That wasn't rhetoric or rhetoric. That was indictment. Because Jefferson wasn't just any man. He was a drafter of the United States Declaration of Independence, a philosopher of liberty, and a slaveholder. And I'm not going to leave this part out. A goddamn pedophile. Banneker forced him to sit in that contradiction, not emotionally, logically. He reminded Jefferson, you fought against British tyranny. You demanded freedom from oppression. You called domination immoral. So what do you call slavery? What makes this moment powerful is not just what Banneker said, it's how he said it. No shouting, no insults, no rage, just precision. Just disciplined, undeniable reasoning. He used Christian morality, enlightenment, philosophy, Jefferson's own words, and turned them into a mirror. Because Banneker understood something deeply strategic. If you can make a man confront his own beliefs, you don't have to defeat him. You let hypocrisy defeat him. Then Banneker did something even more devastating. He didn't just argue, he demonstrated. He sent Jefferson his almanac, filled with astronomical calculations, predictions, and scientific observations. In a society that claimed black people were intellectually inferior, here was a black man mastering the heavens. And it wasn't just a flex, that was evidence. A direct assault on the pseudoscience used to justify slavery. Because see, slavery didn't just need chains. It needed a story. That black people were lesser. That they were incapable. That they were naturally suited for bondage. Banneker shattered that narrative with math. The founding lie exposed. This moment forces us to confront something uncomfortable. The contradiction wasn't a mistake, it was a design. America didn't accidentally fail to live up to its details. It declared universal equality while structuring selective humanity. That tension between principle and practice is the American story. And from the very beginning, black people saw it clearly. This fight didn't start later, it started at the beginning. There's a dangerous myth that the struggle for justice came later, that people eventually realized slavery was wrong. No. From the moment this country defined itself, black voices were already challenging it, exposing it, demanding accountability. Banneker wasn't the exception. He was part of a tradition. Truth tellers without power. Thinkers without recognition. Patriots denied citizenship. So when you ask what happens when a nation's ideals don't match its actions, history gives you the answer. It produces people like Banneker. People who refuse to let words float above reality. People who pull those words down and force a nation to answer for them. And the real question isn't just 1791. It's about right now. Who's willing to confront contradiction today? Who's willing to hold power accountable? Not with noise, but with truth so sharp it can't be ignored. Because Banneker showed us something timeless. You don't need permission to challenge power. You need evidence and the courage to show it. This is Open Eye, where the evidence is clear. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. Open Eye. When Harlem stood for Ethiopia and America said no. Let's talk about a moment they don't teach because it exposes too much truth about power, race, and the limits of American freedom. In 1935, when fascist dictator Benito Mussolini launched his brutal invasion of Ethiopia, the world watched. European powers hesitated. The so-called League of Nations issued weak condemnations. White-led governments calculated interests. But in Harlem, black people moved. Not with speeches, not with hashtags, with commitment. Harlem organized, Harlem mobilized, Harlem volunteered. Because Ethiopia was not just another country. It was a symbol. One of the last uncolonized nations on the African continent. A living rebuttal to white supremacy's global lie that Africa was meant to be conquered. And at the center of that symbol stood Haile Selassie, a black sovereign facing down European fascism. So black Americans, descendants of the enslaved, survivors of Jim Crow, citizens denied full humanity in their own land, says something powerful. If Africa is under attack, we are under attack. They volunteered to fight. Let that sink. Let that sink in for a second. Men who couldn't vote freely, men who couldn't walk safely in the South, men who were lynched, segregated, locked out of opportunity, were ready to cross an ocean to defend African sovereignty. That is Pan-Africanism in its rawest form. Not theory, not poetry, action. And what did America do? America blocked them. The same United States government that constantly speaks about freedom, democracy, and defending nations stepped in to prevent black Americans from leaving to fight fascism abroad. Why? Because a line had to be maintained. See, a dangerous precedent was forming. Black people asserting global political agency. Black people aligning across borders. Black people identifying not just as American subjects, but as part of a worldwide African struggle. That was the threat. Understand this clearly. It wasn't just about neutrality laws. It wasn't just about foreign policy. It was about control. If black Americans could organize internationally, if they could fight for black sovereignty abroad, if they could see themselves as part of a global movement, then how long before they demanded full sovereignty, dignity, and power at home? So the door was shut. Most volunteers were denied passports, blocked, contained, neutralized. Meanwhile, Mussolini dropped chemical weapons on Ethiopian civilians. Yes, chemical weapons, mustard gas, bombs on villages, war crimes in plain sight. And the so-called civilized world largely stood by. Let that contradiction sit heavy. Black men in Harlem were ready to fight fascism, and the U.S. government stopped them while fascism advanced. But even in being blocked, something powerful happened. This woman ignited a deeper Pan-African consciousness. It strengthened the understanding that black struggle was not confined to Birmingham, Harlem, or Wilmington, but stretched from Mississippi to Addis Ababa. It exposed America's hypocrisy. It revealed the limits of its moral claims, and it reminded black people of a truth that still echoes today. Our liberation has never been confined by borders, only by systems designed to keep us divided. Harlem didn't fail Ethiopia. America failed both. And that history matters because every time we're told to narrow our focus, to forget global solidarity, to stay in our place, we should remember this. There was a time when black people in Harlem were ready to fight fascism on African soil, and the system made sure they didn't. That wasn't an accident. That was policy. And policy tells you exactly who freedom is really for. Stay woke. It's the open eye. Hey, Steve, I see you, bro. All right, all right. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. What's this? March 2026. So I'll be 65 end of this month. 3 months ago, or 2 months ago, January 1961, Patrice Lumumba was murdered. Justice 65 years late, but still incomplete. Let's be very clear from the start. This is not justice. This is gesture dressed up as accountability. What am I talking about? A Belgian court has now ruled that Patrice Lumumba's case can proceed against one man. And what's his name? Etienne Devenon, a 93-year-old former trainee diplomat. One man. One. For one of the most consequential political assassinations of the 20th century. Yes, one of the most consequential. Let's talk about what really happened. In 1961, Patrice Lumumba, Congo's first democratically elected prime minister, was not just killed, he was removed. Removed because he represented something dangerous. True African independence. Control over Congo's vast mineral wealth. A refusal to be a puppet of Western powers. Congo wasn't just another country, it was and still is a treasure chest. Uranium, cobalt, copper, diamonds. The same uranium used in the bombs dropped on Hiroshima came from Congo. So when Lumumba said, this belongs to the Congolese people, he signed his own death warrant. Don't let them fool you into believing that this was the work of a rogue diplomat. This was a coordinated international operation involving the Belgium state, the United States, Western intelligence networks, corporate mining interests. Central Intelligence Agency documents have long shown that Lumumba was viewed as a threat during the Cold War. Dwight D. Eisenhower's administration discussed his removal. Belgium never truly let go of its colonial grip, even after independence. And let's not forget, corporations don't need balance. They need stability. And Lumumba represented disruption. I'll tell you why this trial falls short. Putting Devenon on trial does not answer the real questions. Who ordered Lumumba's assassination? Who funded it? Who benefited from it? Because the truth is uncomfortable. The people who orchestrated this were not low-level diplomats. They were sitting in government offices, boardrooms, and intelligence agencies. And most of them never faced a courtroom. Justice delayed is justice denied. 65 years later, Lumumba's family is still waiting. Africa is still dealing with the consequences. The global system that enabled his murder is still intact. This isn't just about the past. The destabilization of Congo opened the door to decades of exploitation, proxy wars, resource extraction without sovereignty. Lumumba's assassination wasn't just a killing. It was a blueprint. And here's the bigger truth. What we're seeing now is not justice. It's historical management. Yeah. A controlled acknowledgement. It's a limited admission. Carefully contained narrative, because real justice will require naming governments, exposing intelligent operations, holding corporations accountable. And that will shape the foundation of how global power actually works. Don't let them reduce Lumumba's assassination to one agent diplomat. This was empire protecting itself. This was colonization refusing to die. This was capitalism backed by military power, making sure resources stayed in the right hands. So no, this is not justice. This is history knocking on the door and power only opening it halfway, if that much. Until the full truth is told, until all perpetrators are named, Lumumba is not just a martyr of Congo. He is a reminder of what happens when a nation dares to truly be free. I'm Patrice. Hey, Brother Vaughn, I see you there. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is The Open Eye. All right, let's deal with something head on. This idea that somehow the main contradiction in America is class. And if we just hold hands across color lines, everything will fix itself. Bullshit. No. That's not analysis. That's wishful thinking dressed up as theory. Because history, real history, not the sanitized version, tells us something very different. W.E.B. Du Bois, he broke it down over a century ago. He said poor whites were given a psychological wage. Not real wealth, not land, not power, but something just as effective. The right to feel superior to black people. And time after time, when faced with a choice between solidarity and that wage, they chose that wage. After Reconstruction, they chose whiteness. During labor movements, they chose exclusion. When policies could have filled and lifted everybody, they chose hierarchy. Even when it cost them. Even when it hurt them. Even when it kept them poor. Now let's be clear. That didn't happen by accident. The system didn't just divide people randomly. It engineered that choice. because a divided working class is a controlled working class. And this is where John Henry Clark steps in. Dr. Clark didn't deal in fantasies. He dealt in survival. He understood something fundamental. If your freedom depends on someone else overcoming their conditioning, you are not free, you're waiting. So let's stop playing games. Every time we get close to building something real, racism shows up. And too often it gets embraced. Not resisted, not rejected, embraced. So no, black people cannot afford to build strategy on hope. Not hope in allies, not hope in moral awakenings. Not hope that history suddenly forgets itself. Now that means alliances are impossible. It means this: alliances are conditional. Self-reliance is mandatory. You don't start with solidarity, you start with strength. You don't assume unity, you test it. You don't gamble your survival on potential allies. You build power that does not require permission. Because history has already taught us the lesson. The question is, are we finally ready to learn it? Because let's get real here. We got those that want to focus on fixing the secondary issue, which is classism, before you fix the primary issue. And you ask, what is the primary issue? Racism is the reason we don't have universal health care. Racism is the reason we now have credit scores. Racism is the reason why tuition is now through the effing roof. Racism is the reason we are stuck with an unqualified president going around starting wars and clearing out all of America's allies. I mean, you can't put racism on the back burner. We can't. You don't gamble your survival on potential allies when they have a history of betrayal. This is The Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. Right here on The Open Eye. What's going on? Oh, the lights didn't just go out. Nah, they didn't just go out. Let's stop pretending this story started today. Because when people wake up and see headlines about Cuba and crisis, blackouts, shortages, instability, they're being shown the final chapter without being told the beginning. Before Castro ever took power, Cuba was not some free, thriving democracy. You know what Cuba was a playground. A playground for American corporations, a playground for U.S.-backed political interests, and yes, a playground for organized crime. Under Fulgencio Batista, Cuba became a regime propped up by U.S. support, financial, political, and strategic. While the Cuban people faced poverty and repression, Havana was turned into a resort economy dominated by foreign interests. Yeah, with hotels where browner skinned, brown and black Cubans were not allowed. American businesses controlled major sectors. The American mafia operated casinos and nightlife. Cuban elites lived comfortably, while everyday Cubans did not. See, these are the people down in Miami right now calling for the demise of Castro's successors. That was the order the revolution disrupted. So when Castro and the revolutionaries came in 1959, they didn't just change leadership, they disrupted a system of extraction. And the response from the United States, not reflection, not diplomacy, punishment. And we're talking about one of the longest running economic embargoes in modern history. Decades of sanctions designed to explicitly isolate and pressure Cuba economically. And it didn't stop there. The CIA didn't just observe Castro, they actively tried to remove him. Multiple assassination plots, covert operations, and yes, documented efforts that involve leveraging figures tied to organized crime networks. This is not conspiracy theory. This is declassified history. So when we talk about Cuba today, we are not talking about a country operating under normal global conditions. We're talking about a nation that has spent over half a century under sustained economic restriction and external pressure. And that matters because infrastructure doesn't collapse in a vacuum. Power grids don't become fragile overnight. Economic isolation has consequences that compound over time on maintenance, on fuel access, on modernization. Now, here's where people get uncomfortable. If your policies contribute to long-term economic strain, you don't get to act shocked when systems fail under that strain. That doesn't require exaggeration. That doesn't require emotionalism. That requires cause and effect over time. And if current policies tighten those same pressures, restricting access to fuel, limiting resources, then yes, those decisions carry weight in present-day outcomes. That's not about partisan loyalty, that's about accountability. Because the people sitting in the dark tonight in Cuba are not policymakers, they're families, they're elders, they're children. And their reality is shaped not just by what happened this week, but what has been done to their country for generations. So no, this story doesn't start with a blackout. It starts with control, resistance, retaliation, and a long history of power being exercised beyond borders. And we're going to talk about Cuba, and we're going to tell the whole story, not just the convenient one. This is Dove and I. WHGE 95.3 FM. I gotta place some blame. Because none of it would be happening right now if accountability had been real when it mattered most. If that gangster, incompetent gangster, had gone to prison for the January 6th United States Capitol attack like he should have, we'd be living in a different, completely different political reality right now. Let's stop dancing around that. January 6th was not a protest. It was not tourism. It was an attack on the very idea of democratic transfer of power. And everybody saw it live in real time. No mystery, no confusion, no gray area. And yet the man at the center of it all walked away. Why? Because the system blinked. Because Merrick Garland, effing coward, chose caution over courage, procedure over protection, and delay over justice. It told future authoritarians, you can push the limits and nothing will happen. It told extremist movements the law is negotiable if you have power. And it told everyday Americans there are two systems of justice, one for the powerful, one for everybody else. And that's the real damage. Yeah. Not just what Trump did, but what wasn't done afterwards. Because accountability delayed is accountability denied. And when you refuse to hold a line at insurrection, you don't get stability, you get escalation. You get louder threats, bolder moves, more recklessness. You get a political environment where consequences no longer exist, only power does. So now people are asking, how did we get here? Wrong question. The real question is, why wasn't the line drawn when the whole world was watching? Because if it had been, we wouldn't be dealing with this crap right now. History doesn't remember what was done. It remembers what was allowed. I blame Biden. And I always forget this fool's name. I got a Merrick Garland with his weak ass. And Biden sat there and watched. Now look what you got. Yeah. What you got is America alone at war. Let me tell you about the cost of burning every bridge. This moment isn't just about one man's anger or one conflict overseas. It's about the unraveling of an entire approach to power. What we're witnessing is what happens when a nation confuses dominance with leadership. Because real leadership, especially on a global scale, is not built on fear, coercion, or public humiliation. It's built on relationships that can withstand disagreement. It's built on credibility. And most importantly, it's built on restraint. The Orange disaster has governed as if alliances are transactional, disposable, and subordinate to its personal authority. But alliances are not business deals you can renegotiate through intimidation. They are long-term commitments shaped by shared sacrifice, historical trust, and mutual strategic interests. In the Orange disaster, he spent his time in office dismantling that foundation piece by piece. Let's take this out of the realm of rhetoric and into reality. When the United States needed support in past conflicts, whether you agree with those wars or not, coalitions were formed. NATO partners participated, intelligence was shared, logistics were coordinated, even reluctant allies showed up because the diplomatic groundwork had been laid. And now that groundwork is gone. The United Kingdom, France, Spain, Canada, Australia, these are not fringe states. These are core pillars of Western Alliance, the Western Alliance system. When they collectively said no, it is not hesitation, it's a loss of confidence in American leadership. Now let's bring it back home. Because while this plays out on the global stage, the consequences land domestically. When there's no coalition, American troops carry more of the burden, more deployments, more exposure, more casualties. And for what? A conflict that by all appearances lacks a clearly articulated objective and has been entered without international backing that typically legitimizes and stabilizes military engagement. That's not strategy. That's improvisation. Who the hell you think you are, on the comedy stage? And the history is very clear about what happens when nations enter conflicts driven by ego, distraction, or political pressure rather than coherent planning. The cost spiral, the mission drifts, the exit becomes unclear. And then there's the political undercurrent that cannot be ignored. When leadership is entangled in scandal, when credibility is under constant scrutiny, there's always the temptation to redirect public attention, to create a new crisis that overshadows the existing one. That's not speculation. That's pattern. And whether people want to confront it or not, the question has to be asked. Is this conflict rooted in necessity, or is it being accelerated by political vulnerability? And then there's Japan. Now, for decades, Japan has been one of the most consistent allies of the United States, economically, militarily, and strategically in the Pacific. I almost said the Pacific Ocean theater. So when the Japanese Prime Minister reportedly declares she will never return to the United States after being disrespected by Trump, that's not just a personal rebuke, it's symbolic. It tells the world that even America's most disciplined and diplomatic partners are reaching a breaking point. That matters, because global power is not just measured in weapons or GDP. It's measured in how many nations are willing to stand beside you when it counts. And right now, that number is shrinking. And Trump's response, like any spoiled teenage bastard, anger, blame, public frustration that allies won't fall in line. And here's the truth. You cannot bully your way into a coalition. You can't insult your allies, undermine their economies with these BS tariffs, threaten their sovereignty, and then expect loyalty on demand. That's not how geopolitics work. That's how isolation begins. And isolation for a superpower, that's pretty dangerous. Because without allies, military operations become more costly and less effective. Intelligence networks weaken. Supply chains strain. Diplomatic leverage, that's gone. What remains is unilateral action. And unilateral action is a volatile region. In a volatile region, like Iran, carries big risks. Because if it's the latter, then we are not just dealing with bad foreign policy. We're dealing with dangerous governance. Who didn't know that? And the tragedy is this. The people making these decisions will not be the ones absorbing consequences. It will be the soldiers deployed with uncertainty, the families waiting at home, the communities that bear the long-term scars of war. And look how he's reacting. He is using returning bodies draped in the American flag for photo ops to raise money for his PAC, for his campaigns, for his PAC, whatever, the political super PACs and crap. Taking pictures with those. Telling people, you got to send us some money so we can get this straight. Yeah. That's who bears the consequences. Now, from what I've heard, some soldiers are waking up and they're refusing to go. Right? And there's an organization, I forgot the name of it, military resistance.org or something along those lines. I'm going to look it up and post it though. Mm-hmm. But the communities at home that bear the long-term scars of war. And on the global stage, it will be civilians caught in the crossfire of conflict that could have and should have been approached with far more discipline and diplomacy. Actually, it shouldn't have happened at all. Because like those soldiers that are reportedly refusing to go, they're telling their superiors, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to fight a war and to put my life on the line for the Epstein class and a war-mongering madman and is not real. You can't lead the world while simultaneously alienating it. See, this is what decline looks like when it refuses to recognize itself. And if there isn't a course correction fast, the cost of that decline is going to be measured in far more than damaged relationships. When you joined the military, you presented the American government with a blank check that said unlimited funds up to and including my life. It's going to be measured in human lives. This is Dove and I. WHGE 95.3 FM. Joe Kent. Joe Kent is a prominent figure in counterterrorism with an extensive background in special forces and the CIA. He resigned from his position, citing a fundamental disagreement with the current administration's foreign policy. Kent's departure is significant given his distinguished career, which includes 11 deployments and a personal legacy of service through his late wife. In his formal critique, Kent argued that the administration has been improperly influenced into maintaining military engagements that lack clear strategic value. His resignation was punctuated by a principled refusal to oversee operations that result in the loss of life for a cause he no longer believes in. This move serves as a stark indictment of the current conflict's justification and highlights a growing rift between seasoned field operatives and administrative policy makers. What makes this movement worth paying attention to isn't just that Joe Kent resigned, it's why he resigned and what that reveals about the machinery of American foreign policy. Here you have someone who is not an outsider, not a protester on the sidelines, not a critic looking in from academia. This is a man shaped by the very institutions that carry out U.S. power abroad, special forces, intelligence, counterterrorism, 11 deployments. This is someone who has seen the consequences of policy, not in briefings, but in blood, in terrain, in real time. So when a figure like that steps away and says, I can no longer justify what we're doing, that's not a minor disagreement. That's a fracture. And let's be honest, what his critique is really pointing to. He's challenging the ideal that U.S. military engagement is always grounded in clear strategy or necessity. He's calling out something deeper, something that many people had suspected for decades, that American foreign policy is often driven less by coherent objectives and more by inertia, influence, and institutional momentum. Wars don't just continue because they make sense. They continue because systems are built to sustain them. Contractors need contracts. Politicians need to avoid looking weak. Agencies justify their budgets, and somewhere in that cycle, the original purpose gets buried. Kent's refusal to oversee operations that cost lives for a cause he could no longer believe in exposes a moral contradiction at the heart of that system. It raises a question that policymakers rarely have to answer publicly. At what point does duty become complicity? When a man trained to carry out war decides he could no longer justify it, don't dismiss him. Listen carefully, because sometimes the clearest truth about power comes from those who've been closest to it. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. All right. I better get on. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. What you do with what you see. And just like that, when we come to the close of another Open Eye, I hope you learned something. I learned something before I got here. But here's the thing. It was never just about information. It's about what you do with it. Because awareness without action is just observation. And observation alone has never changed the system. Every generation is faced with a choice: to accept the world as it is or to challenge the forces that keep it that way. And understand this. Systems don't maintain themselves by accident. They are reinforced daily through silence, distraction, and fear. And sometimes through comfort. So the question isn't whether the truth is out there. The question is, what are you willing to do once you recognize it? Will you question more? Will you research deeper? Will you speak when it's inconvenient? And will you stand when it's uncomfortable? Because history has shown us over and over again, real change doesn't come from the majority. It comes from the committed. The ones who refuse to look away, the ones who refuse to be quiet, the ones who understand that clarity is not a destination, it's a responsibility. So as you move through your day, pay attention, watch closely, think critically. Don't let anyone do your thinking for you. Because the moment you surrender that, you surrender more than you realize. This is the Open Eye. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you. Don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. This has been Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Thanks for joining. All right. Yeah. Pay attention, y'all. Pay attention. Pay attention to Sudan and the Congo and Iran. Okay. Global African supremacy. Because the world was a much better place when the African ruled. Peace and love. I'm Patrice Gibbs.